Profits, are they good or bad? I'll get to kind of the socialism versus capitalism kind of thing in a minute, but what are profits? When we look at businesses, we think kind of one thing, but let's start at something a little more granular, like our family. Most of us, and most of my life, literally the amount of money that came in equaled the amount that went out. I mean, we had really, really tight budgets. You have kids, on and on. So there wasn't any discretionary spending. I mean, literally, there's none. And for about half of us, that's true. So there were no technically profits, because the discretionary income is a profit. What do you do with that? You could save it, invest it. You can buy something a little nicer for the wife or yourself or whatever. Maybe buy the kids some new clothes. But at the end of the day, it's that extra income in the family that's kind of like profits. In a business, it's the same thing. Here's all the money it took to run the company, and here's all the money it took or that we got in revenue, and that differential is profits. There's a bunch of accounting things that go into it as well, and I won't go into those. They're kind of complicated. But if you had a small business, you'd be familiar that there's things like depreciation and stuff that can affect your profitability. But at the end of the day, it's that two different levels. The amount of revenue, the amount of expenses, and the profits are what results. Anything good or bad about that? Can be, right? So if you're a family and you use that money poorly, that's not a good thing. If you're a business and you use the money poorly, that's a bad thing. And it generally will mean you will go out of business, which is why most businesses take great care in terms not only how they operate the cost, how efficiently they can do those things, but if they're taking some of those profits and doing things with them, they're really careful. There has to be a return on those investments, or it's not a good thing. And even better, so when you look at big business, especially, because everybody's always taking a shot at big business because they're big, they make billions in profits. They may take 100 million in sales, 100 billion in sales to make $1 billion in profit, or 2 or 3 or 4 billion. But at the end of the day, everybody focuses on them because the numbers are big, right? Kinda. So if you looked at the typical business in that large arena, the annual increase in revenues or in profitability is around 13% of whatever the revenue is. So if you're a $100 billion company, you make $13 billion. That's average, right? But, people go further. The people on the left love to take shots, especially to anybody that's in commodities like oil. So when inflation arrived, actually the day after Joe won the election, it started climbing in the gas because he kept punishing them with ideas to reduce supply. So it made it harder to invest. I mean, all kinds of things. And these things started building up, not when he took presidency, but actually the 2 months after the election before the presidency. So, so it's driving down, whatever you do, don't drill more. At the same time, it's driving up prices. They're making a lot of money. And then they want to do a windfall profits tax because they created the problem. Kind of insane. But if you take Exxon, so that the year that in question, they made about $400 billion in sales. We get a cheat sheet so I get this right. And $55 billion in what? Profits, right? And guess what? That's about 13%. Now, the year before, they didn't do as well, and their profitability was lower. It was under 10% because prices were low. So they had less profits and a lower percentage. Now, if you take that to, if big profits and big percentages are a problem, let's look at Apple. This cheat sheet. So they did $395 billion that year, and they had $100 billion in profits. Anybody take a shot at Apple? No, don't know why. Don't understand it. But I mean, that's 25%. That's a huge number. That is a huge number. Now, is that bad? Well, Apple seems to be using those profits in sensible ways to make better and better products. I'm not going to complain. Just so you know, I own their stock. Not a lot of it, but it's a nice little chunk and makes me a little money, and that's great. But here's the deal. These are scorecard information, right? If you go to the SEC and say, what do I have to do if I'm a corporation, a publicly traded corporation where there's stock involved, there's a whole list of things that have to be published, including things like an annual report and a 10K and some other things, so that the people understand how well that company is running so they can decide what the value of the stock is to them, collectively, or as a business analyst, or as a whatever. It's a scorecard. It's an unbelievably good scorecard. It would be great if we took those same rules and applied them to government and how they spend money and how well they either spend or don't spend money. Again, something civil has proposed for a long time. Not much movement there. But at the end of the day, profits then become a scorecard. Can be used in two ways. Can you use like me and lots of other people that say, hey, that's a good stock buy, I'll do that. Or by customers, this is a great product, I'm going to keep buying it. There's two scorecards, customers and stockholders. And they're really, really important. Really, really important. So at the end of the day, and then I think there's a third thing. So if you hate big profits, even if you like the product and you say, I am not going to buy that product or that stock because they are too rich, you can do that too. The scorecard can read any way you want it. If you like profitability and think it's a good measure of success, you can buy. If you think it's way too much and those guys shouldn't have all that money, you can vote the other way. It's great. You can vote for the product, for the stock, everything based on a good scorecard. Which is why socialist enterprises or socialist nations suffer. There's no scorecard. Or none that anyone pays attention to. Schools are a good example. We had pretty much the same amount of failing schools, 60 years ago as we do today. We educated kids to proficiency at about the same rate. We spend a lot more money than we did years and years ago. But at the end of the day, even though there are some scored cards published, like proficiency ratings, nobody does anything about it. Literally, it's nuts. Even despite spending a huge amount of money, nothing has changed. It's like, so are we looking at the scorecard right, or are we doing anything about it? Are we letting the customers, the parents, vote? There are not any stockholders except politicians, and they're voting sometimes not in the best interest of the parents. That's problematic. I'll give you another example about socialist society. So, I went to China in 2010 on a business kind of engagement, met with customers, and it was odor mitigation. It was great technology, really interesting. And so I'm at a wastewater plant. They stink, right? And they're having problems because the neighbors hate it and blah, blah, blah. You know how that goes. And so we get to the end and I kind of give them some ideas on what it would cost. And the guy goes, and oh, by the way, the environmental minister for that part of Beijing was in on the meeting. And it's like one guy's looking at the other. And, I'm asking the plant manager, well, here's the expense. And he's looking at the environmental guy. And it's like the money the plant might earn, any profits, there are not any, right? But let's say there might have been, never gets reinvested in a way that's sensible. In the Soviet Union, when it blew up, people went in and looked at the industrial plants, first time look in, forever. And there was circa 1950. Nobody had ever done any updates because what might have been profitable use of the money to increase the productivity of the plant went somewhere else. It was a political decision. It's the same thing with schools. It's a political decision. It's not an economic one. It's not about customer service. It's not about any of those things. So are profits good? They're good or bad. And here's the great thing. In this society, you get to decide. The more and more of our society that gets taken away from it, where the politicians are making the decisions, the less likely you're going to have good outcomes. It's kind of a socialist bearing. It's like you give power to somebody, they're never going to give it back to you, right? And that's kind of, when you look at schools or welfare or the retirement system or half our healthcare system, it's socialist adventure is it approach. to doing things that don't take care of the core business, medicine and schools and everything. They are a business in a sense, and they don't work very well. So, but the other way, you get to decide. Anyway, I'm Tom Llewellyn. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, and next week, social justice versus individual justice.